Hello all, and welcome to our group presentation on the 10th Amendment. I'm Lacey.
And I'm Bjorn. The 10th Amendment states that the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively to the people.
The 10th Amendment has to do with states' rights, and that the state gets to act as a sovereign state. Basically, the federal government cannot interfere with the state governing unless necessary to do so. That's called the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 states that Congress has the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and along the states.
The 10th Amendment practically works in Washington State's favor because in our state, same-sex marriage and recreational marijuana is legal, which are two things not yet legal in the federal government.
But the Commerce Clause also works in American citizens' favors too, in times such as the segregation of schools between whites and blacks, and the Civil Rights Movement, where states' rights didn't want to give up laws and the federal government overruled them.
One court case was Hammer versus Degenhardt in 1918. Back then, child labor was common. Congress passed Keaton-Owen Act of 1916, banning the shipment across state lines from factories where children employed children under 14 years old. Congress claimed Commerce Clause. Because of this, the law was overturned in Hammer versus Degenhardt. The reasoning was the 10th Amendment.
The next thing we're going to talk about is the Fair Labor Standards Act, which was passed during President Roosevelt's term. This set a standard minimum wage for the whole country to 25 cents. President Roosevelt used the Commerce Clause to say it was necessary to set a minimum wage for the whole nation. The act prohibited shipment interstate for manufactured goods by employees who received sub-minimum wage.
Next case was U.S. versus Darby in 1941. Darby was charged with violating the Fair Labor Standards Act. Because of this, Darby challenged this by saying it was not within the
Commerce Clause
powers of Congress. The Supreme Court overruled Hammer versus Degenhardt ruling, said it was within Congress powers. People thought the 10th Amendment was dead.
The next case is Frye versus the United States in 1975. Congress authorized temporary wage and price controls due to inflation during Nixon's term. The state of Ohio claimed the 10th Amendment right to act as a sovereign state in Frye versus U.S. The Supreme Court said wage controls were a valid exercise of the Commerce Clause, thus overruling their last ruling.
Last was the National League of Cities versus Usury in 1976. They extended federal minimum wage to all state employees, but what were considered traditional state plus government jobs. The Supreme Court was split 5-4, and it was decided that it was the 10th Amendment who protected the states.
And the last case is the Garcia versus the San Antonio Metropolitan Transport Authority. 9 years later from the last case, the Supreme Court overruled itself again, which was uncommon for them to overrule themselves, and especially in such a short period of time. The ruling went to Garcia, who got to receive federal minimum wage because he wasn't being paid it for the San Antonio Metropolitan Transit Authority. The battle over the 10th Amendment is still going on today, but now it seems we're in truism.
While that may have been confusing, these court cases show in our country, which has both state and federal government, it is difficult to keep the federal government's power in check.
Well, I'm Lacey, and that's Bjorn, and that was a quick brief of the 10th Amendment and its history.